Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you might be in the world today. Welcome to the Diabolical Developer's Guide to Picking Your Java. It's a great pleasure here to be speaking at the J4K conference. Strange times we all live in at the moment. There aren't in-person conferences. You may hear the barking sound of a fox outside my window this evening here in London, or other crazy things may go on, but this is all part of the fun. My name is Martijn Verburg. I am the Principal Software Engineering Group Manager for Java at Microsoft. Yes, you heard that right, at Microsoft, where our group works on OpenJDK itself, so Java itself. We also have a bunch of performance analysis tooling that we use at Microsoft, and we provide some services, professional services inside Microsoft with regards to Java performance. Some of you might know me from the ecosystem as the Diabolical Developer. And I will now get into the presentation. So, warning up front, this is me. So you'll get a bit of a warts and all presentation today. But hopefully you'll enjoy it, and I'll keep you as entertained as possible for what can at times be a bit of a dry topic. But here we go. So, this is how we're going to spend our time together today. I have some boring but very necessary terminology for you to understand, and that's because there's this interplay between OpenJDK, which is the open source community and project that produces Java itself, the Java standards body, various vendors who produce Java binaries from OpenJDK sources, so on and so forth. So there's a little bit of terminology to learn, and then it'll all be clear for you. We're going to talk about the ecosystem changes. What has actually happened? Why do we now need to think carefully about picking our Java? What changed? It used to just be Oracle or Sun Java all the time, right? I'll talk a little bit about why you want to actually make a change and choose a new Java carefully, and some reasons in terms of Java's new container support. I'll then walk you through all the choices, and there are many choices out there from lots of really great vendors, great providers, and you get everything from some free public updates to fully fledged commercial support, and there is a wide range of choices for you to enjoy. And then I'll summarize with a conclusion and what your next step should be. So it should be that simple. My goal is here by the end of the talk that you in your head will completely understand what your choices are, and that you have a concrete next step to take away on which Java to pick next. So on to the evil part, the terminology. I'll keep this brief, and I'll just ask you not to fall asleep on the other side. Right, so we have Java SE. So this is Java Standard Edition. And what that really means is it's an actual standard, it's a specification. And this specification is ratified through the Java community process called the JCP. To all intents and purposes, this is the Java standards body. And on that standards body, you have folks like Oracle, you have Twitter, you have Java user groups like So Java from Brazil or the London Java community. And you have users of Java, so some of the major investment banks, other Java vendors such as Azul Systems, IBM, Red Hat, so on and so forth. In order to call yourself Java, you must do two things. One is you must pass the TCK, the Technical Compatibility Kit, when you are building from OpenJDK in particular. The TCK is something you can get from Oracle. As long as you're an OpenJDK derivative, you can generally get this for free. It's not open source, but you can get it through what's called the OCTLA. And you run this TCK and you say yes or no. You don't discuss the TCK, you can't talk about the internals, but you can say yes, I've passed it, or yes, I've not. If you've passed it, you can say that you are compatible with the Java specification. And this is kind of like an important rubber stamp that you need to prove to the outside world that you're actually compatible with the specification. To actually call yourself Java, like to use a trademark, you've then got to enter an agreement with Oracle. We won't go into those details. That's a topic for another day. OpenJDK is the place, the community, where the source code for Java gets built. And I won't say this is all Javas. There are a couple of closed source implementations of Java, such as Azul Zulu, which is fully Java compliant. So they pass the TCK and they can call themselves Java, I believe, or at least Java compatible. But a vast majority of the Java you see out there today is based off the OpenJDK source, OpenJDK project. It's good old GPL v2 with class path exception licensed. And there's a whole bunch of vendors who build OpenJDK binaries. So IBM, Red Hat, Oracle themselves, of course, Azul, Alibaba, SAP, Bellsoft. I'll go into those choices later on. It is also the reference implementation of the standard, of the specification. So you can be guaranteed that the OpenJDK, when it is tagged for a GA release, for example, that thing is the reference implementation for the actual specification. So when we talk about OpenJDK binaries, we're just talking about people taking that source code, building it on their build machines, and producing binaries for you to enjoy. Now, the change came in recently, and where Oracle changed its licensing around Oracle's Java, and we have a new release cadence. So every 6 months, we now get a new Java. And for a lot of risk-averse organizations or organizations that do not want to follow the 6-month upgrade cycle, there is this concept of a long-term service release. This is really a gentle person's agreement between all of the various OpenJDK vendors or providers, that every 3 years, so every 6 releases of Java going forward, that version will be designated as a long-term service release. And that means, pretty much all of the vendors will actually provide either free public updates or provide some sort of commercial support for that particular version. So that today, actually I'll go into the detail later as to which versions that covers. I know I've got slides on that later on. Azul systems have been around for a long time. They build a really fantastic OpenJDK binary called Zulu. They are also in the game of providing medium-term service releases. So for folks who want to get some of the advantages of, say, Java 13 or Java 15, because there's some cool new feature that's really beneficial to them, or perhaps a performance improvement in one of the garbage collectors, as an example. But they need that thing to stick around for 2-3 years, right? Azul is one of the vendors who will support you in that mission. So what the heck just happened? Well, today you have stable, secure, and free Java. And that is how life has always been. But with the free comes a bit of a let the buyer beware now. And what's really happening is that Oracle has changed its licensing. So you used to get Oracle's Java typically, and you'd get free public updates for a very long time. And then after a while, they would end of life that free public updates. You'd have to enter some sort of commercial support agreement to continue, for example, getting free updates to say, Java 6 or Java 7 back in the day and today Java 8. But now with the new 6-month release cadence, Oracle has changed the way it works and changed their licensing. So Oracle is still the project lead for the very latest version of Java. So when Java 14 came out, Java 15's just come out, Oracle leads those projects. And they produce an OpenJDK binary for that version, which they will support freely for 6 months. And they'll give you public updates, because they lead the project, and they produce usually 2 quarterly releases, and everyone gets to enjoy that for free. As long as you're using Oracle's OpenJDK binary, and I'll get into that distinction later on. After that, if you wish to continue with Oracle, you've got to move to the Oracle JDK. So not the Oracle OpenJDK, but the Oracle JDK, which is a commercially licensed Java. Or alternatively, you can move to another OpenJDK vendor who may or may not charge you for commercial support and who may or may not provide those free public updates. Confused? So am I. We'll continue talking about this topic and I'll make sure it's clear for you later on. So, as I talked about earlier, Oracle had their end of public updates, and this happened with Java 8. And so for those of you who are still stuck on Java 8, and I do encourage you to move to Java 11 at least, Java 8 8U212, I believe, someone will call me up on this if I got the update number wrong, was the last free public update that Oracle has produced for Java 8. So after that, you had 2 choices. You could either pay Oracle for a commercial support agreement, and it's a perfectly valid option, and they will continue to give you Oracle Java 8 update beyond 2.12, which you will pay for and you get the updates. Or you're able to shift to an OpenJDK provider such as Red Hat, IBM, Adopt OpenJDK, or Azul Zulu, and rely on the patches and free updates that they are producing still upstream at OpenJDK. So there's still a open repository where you see the source code work happening, and they all produce different binaries based on that. I think, that's just my slideware going a bit strange. So just be very clear for folks who are using Oracle. You have the Oracle branded binary. This is Oracle JDK, and you get that from java.oracle.com. Okay, so this is the commercially licensed Java, and so you need to make sure that when you are, especially working in your containers and your Docker images and so forth, that you're actually making sure you're getting the right one. For those of you who don't want commercial support or who don't want to enter a subscription agreement and who do not want to be forced to upgrade every 6 months, you may want to look at either the Oracle OpenJDK binary, but remember you'll have to migrate every 6 months to the next version, or you'll have to use an image from one of the other OpenJDK providers and check their T's and C's. But generally speaking, Azul Zulu image or Adopt OpenJDK's image is free as in use and free as in bear. So you can just go ahead and use that. So again, as a container user, you want to go to Docker Hub, look at your OpenJDK alternatives. I think you'll see that, for example, both Zulu and Adopt OpenJDK are two extremely popular ones, downloaded over 10 million times each, as I recall. We also have the new release model to deal with. So Java is now released every 6 months. And this is awesome, right? We get new features. The OpenJDK engineers, primarily Oracle engineers, are no longer trying to scramble every 2 or 3 years, trying to pack in every last little feature into a release, right? They now have the time to kind of bake a feature in properly, get it tested maybe as an incubation module or as an incubation feature, and then release it when it's good and ready, knowing that every 6 months they get another opportunity to do so. So I think it's really fantastic. So hopefully everyone's aware of this and they're up and running with this release cadence. I covered those 2 points, so I will continue on. Long-term service release. So for a lot of enterprises, upgrading Java every 6 months, and despite the backwards compatibility guarantee, there are changes and they can cause breakages, and I think a lot of people got stung with the migration from Java 8 to Java 9, and it's kind of left people with a little bit of fear. I will say from personal experience that migrating from Java 11 to anything above 11 is actually as trivial as it was in the old days, right? So if you used to upgrade, say, from Java 8 underscore 20 to Java 8 underscore 40, and it was effectively just a drop-in replacement, right? That's pretty much the experience you get today if you move from, say, Java 11 to 12 to 13 to 14. However, for large enterprises with maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of JVMs deployed, it's still a risk. And so the long-term service release is really, or the long-term support release is really the option that most of those folks want to go for. So OpenJDK Java 8 has been deemed as a long-term service release or long-term support release. So you'll see that Oracle has a commercial Java 8, which you can commercially pay them for, and they will continue to support that for a very long time. Most of the other OpenJDK vendors, such as, again, Red Hat, IBM, Azul, Adopt OpenJDK, are also continuing to update the Java 8 or OpenJDK 8 source tree at OpenJDK, and all those vendors continue to produce binaries. Now, the question you might ask yourself is, well, if the Oracle engineers are working on Java 8 separately from the rest of the OpenJDK folks, are those two divergent? Is the Oracle Java 8 and the OpenJDK produced Java 8 two separate things? The answer is technically yes, but in practicality, pretty much no. They're very, very close. So you'd be hard pressed to find many differences whatsoever, pragmatically speaking. Oracle's Java 8, of course, does come with some extra features, such as Java effects built in and a few other bits and pieces. So if you rely on those things, then you may want to decide to stay with Oracle. So it's time to modernize. So if you've been on Java 8 or if you've been on Oracle's Java and you're now reassessing your options, there's some good business/technical reasons to do so, right? This is a Java and Kubernetes conference after all, and a lot of you are either building microservices and containers, or at the very least thinking about migrating to containers. And Kubernetes is obviously the orchestration weapon of choice there. So better container support. The really cool thing about Java is that it's now fully modularized. So despite some pain with Java 9 and migrating through Java 9 for end users, this is where Java really comes into play with containers. You can now really tightly bundle your Java application as a single executable, even with a native installer should you choose, and you can kind of hand-pick the modules that you actually want to use. So instead of bundling this huge JRE with your microservice every time, you can really pack those containers down tight in terms of the Java runtime. And it still surprises me how few Java engineers out there actually are aware of this. I'm pretty sure there's some other sessions that have been running either today or previously that cover this topic in more depth. But when you use the combined tools of JLink and JPackage, and I've got a note there to make sure you use the very latest JPackage from Java 15 because it's got a lot of bugs ironed out, but it will package up earlier JDK versions. That you can really create these really, really small, nice, tightly packed JREs, which have really small impact on your containers, which is really awesome. Of course, some folks will be talking about, things like RHEL or Micronauts or some of the other enhancements that have been going on there. Those are also other options to go and explore. But even with your vanilla Java that you don't want to touch or you don't want to move to Quarkus or a new technology, you can still pack Java down tightly. I'll show that in the next slide. So here's an example where David Delabesse, who's one of Oracle's developer advocates, kind of demonstrated that he took the original runtime of 300 meg down to 34 by using various options now that Java gives you internally. So you need to do a little bit of research, but again, using the JLink tool, using JPackage, and using some of these options here, you really can compress your binary right down, which is perfect for microservices and container deployment. There's some other performance boosts which have just kind of naturally really been helpful for containers and all microservices really, and again, containers tend to rule the roost here. Java's deduplicating strings for you automatically. There's class and application data sharing now, which means that you get much faster startup times with later versions of Java. Now, I'm not talking about the sort of startup times that you enjoy from having a native image like you would if you used native image with RHEL VM, as an example. But it's still a significant improvement over your traditional Java startup time. So if cold starts are of particular importance to you, then this helps a little bit. And of course, with the class and application data sharing, it means that some of the warm starts are better as well the next time around. And of course, the dreaded old GC, garbage collectors pausing in the middle of your important microservice, causing you all sorts of pain and suffering. There are now some options. If you've got really short-lived microservices running in your containers, you can actually use the epsilon GC, which is a zero GC, and you just say, look, I'm not going to worry about GCing for this function as a service because the JVM is going to die after it's done its piece anyway. So that's certainly an option should you require it. So, Java's now been modernized to work much better in containers, and you can pack Java really tightly for your container-based deployments, which is very cool. And again, there are other sessions which will dive into the technical detail of that. But this session is really about you understanding and needing to pick which Java or OpenJDK vendor you want to go with, and we have lots of choices. Here is the main list of choices of reputable choices that are out there today. So you have everything from Adopt OpenJDK, which is the multi-vendor community-based option. You've got household names like Alibaba, Amazon. Folks will undoubtedly know Azul. You can get OpenJDK directly from your Linux distribution. You have Oracle's OpenJDK distribution, of course, as well as their Oracle commercial JDK. And Red Hat and SAP also produce very good OpenJDK binaries. So I'm going to go through each of these in turn and give you a little bit of color, a little bit of background about these efforts, and which may help you guide you and your choice going forward. So to begin with, Alibaba, the gigantic cloud vendor, I guess, does more than just cloud, of course, out of China, but increasingly having a global presence. Alibaba have had an OpenJDK team for a long time. They run, I can't even begin to remember now, but certainly close to 1 million JVMs, I personally suspect, in Alibaba Cloud to run their e-commerce engines. And they've worked an awful lot on the performance of their OpenJDK and optimized it for the Alibaba Cloud, right, in particular. And some of those benefits could cross over nicely for your container-based applications as well. We always advise you need to test this yourself, but they've made quite a few changes in terms of performance. And they also, interestingly, have provided an API for you to do some of those unsafe things, but in a somewhat safer manner. This is being overhauled upstream at OpenJDK, so things like Project Panama and Project Valhalla are, and Metropolis are providing, let's say, more official versions of some of these safe ways to do formerly unsafe things. But if you need it right now, then maybe Alibaba Dragonwell, which is a really cool name, is one you can check out. They support Java 8 and 11. On my brief researching around, they had minimal Docker support. I could find some Docker images on their website for Java 8, but it wasn't super clear, and I didn't find a lot on Docker Hub. But if folks find out more, then I'll be happy to hear about it. Amazon Corretto. So Amazon came out with a bit of fanfare, I think a couple of years ago now. For folks who don't know, James Gosling, the father of Java, he works at Amazon. It's fair to say he probably doesn't have a lot to do with Corretto over there. I don't think he's working on the code base or anything, but it's certainly nice that some of his DNA kind of shines through there, I guess. They provide Java 8 and 11. It's incredibly well tested, as you can imagine. It's battle tested. It runs, must run a whole bunch of Amazon services internally. Again, they also have put together a handful of performance tweaks and things that work well for them on Amazon's cloud. They do upstream some of that stuff to OpenJDK, but not all of it makes it. So again, you might find that some of the advantages that Amazon have bought for themselves may be useful for you and your operations. They do certainly have Docker images available, so you can search for Corretto on Docker Hub, and away you go. Next up, Azul. So Azul have been around for a long time now, producing Java, really well done Java binaries. They have an excellent OpenJDK team, really experienced. They definitely know what they're doing. Zulu is a fantastic OpenJDK derivative, and they're actually the people who are currently still maintaining Java 6 and Java 7 source, if I do remember correctly. So if you need to go back that far, then Azul is currently the company you want to go talk to. Again, they provide all the different Linux and container support that you could possibly want. You can find them on Docker Hub. You can get all sorts of variants of their images. And they've got commercial support should you require it. And as a mid-sized vendor, you may or may not find their price point more appealing than some of the larger players out there. If you're a distro purist and you just want to use Yum or apt-get to go get your Java, then you can get your distribution-based OpenJDK. CentOS and RHEL tend to have the Red Hat produced one, which is very good, tends to be TCK'd and well-tested, etc., and you can rely on it pretty well. The Debian one did have a little bit of trouble a year or two ago. They weren't quite mirroring the OpenJDK sources correctly, and they were doing a couple of strange things. That's all been ironed out now. So as long as you're using one of the later distros and you're getting the later OpenJDK package, you should be doing pretty well there. Not much more I can say about that. If you just want this very simple use case and you just want your package manager to take care of it, then just go ahead and use that. Bellsoft, new player on the market, relatively new. They've actually been around for a couple of years now as well, I think. Bunch of former Oracle engineers who were working on OpenJDK itself. Again, they've done a really great job. They know exactly how to build OpenJDK on all the different platforms, provide Docker containers. They're interestingly, I believe, supplying the OpenJDK for VMware, so they've got some big customer credentials now. Yeah, definitely worth checking out and seeing what sort of commercial support they can offer as well. Okay, we couldn't talk about OpenJDK without mentioning Oracle. So Oracle, of course, do the lion's share of the work on OpenJDK. They run all the major projects, all the major future projects as well. And to be blunt, if you and your organization want to kind of help ensure the health of the Java ecosystem going forward, maybe actually looking at Oracle seriously and looking at a subscription license with them is one of the ways you can actually genuinely invest back into Java, right? With their new subscription pricing, I definitely recommend you check that out. I haven't had a look at the latest price lists, but a lot of folks have told me how much more reasonable, a subscription style pricing model from Oracle has been. And of course, Oracle, for their commercial offering, produce you all the Docker containers, all that good stuff. I've listed here Oracle OpenJDK. Now, as a reminder, Oracle produces effectively two Javas. One is called Oracle JDK, that's their commercial one. You get that from java.oracle.com. The other one is just Oracle's OpenJDK, which is their unsupported 6 months only build, and you can get that from jdk.java.net. So just be very careful that you are picking the right one that's appropriate for your needs. Red Hat. If you're running RHEL, just use the Red Hat OpenJDK. It's incredibly well tested and it's built specifically for RHEL. You can't go past it really. You should go for that one. If you're a SAP middleware user or a SAP enterprise user of any description, then you might find the SAP Machine by SAP useful. So recently they've upped their game. They were only supporting Java 8 for a while, but they've now moved up to Java 11 and 14. And you can see there that they're good supporters of PowerPC if you're on that platform, including Docker images, which is cool. And now we're going to go into the section where my biases kick in. So for those of you who may have been keeping a sharp ear out, you will have noticed I have not talked yet about Adopt OpenJDK or Eclipse Adoptium. And so I will cover that now. So here is the big disclaimer. This is a completely biased opinion about Adopt OpenJDK. I actually serve on the steering committee for Adopt OpenJDK, and I was one of the folks, one of many folks that helped kickstart the project and the community initially. So I am completely biased towards it, without a doubt. Also, for transparency's sake, I clearly work for Microsoft. Microsoft is a sponsor of Adopt OpenJDK, so all of the biases creeping in just so folks are aware. So Adopt OpenJDK was a response really by initially Java user group members, so the London Java user group, folks from the Java community, academics, a few of the Java users and Java vendors out there, to really start to try and build binaries that were kind of built by multiple vendors as such, or multiple providers as such. So instead of having a binary which only was reliant on one particular vendor, this was really an attempt at building an open source community around binary distribution, around binaries, and it's been a runaway success. And I'll go into some of the details. So you'll see a whole bunch of logos later on who all the supporters and backers are. But due to that really sort of federated, anyone is welcome as long as they bring along the right effort and expertise. It means that Adopt has an incredibly wide range of platform support. So things like the Raspberry Pi is supported, Lego Mindstorms is supported, all the way through to your major platforms and all the versions you could possibly imagine as well, right from Java 8 upwards. And we do things as well like build some of the future branches. So you'll see us producing builds of Project Panama. You actually also see us building on behalf of some of the other vendors. So we're just starting to build Dragonwell and test Dragonwell. We're testing Amazon's Corretto through our test suite as well. So it's really kind of a community place for OpenJDK builders to come and build and test their binaries and build some business-ready ones as well. So to that point, we have the Adopt Quality Assurance Test Suite, which I'll go into some further detail. That is our quality test suite, which is all completely out in the open, completely open source. You can see every test, you can pull requests to every test. Whole whole bunch of major vendors support it. We, of course, provide Docker images and all the container support you want. We're working on Alpine images as well. And for those who are using Macs, we have things like Homebrew, and we support all the Linux package managers as well. It's really open source at the core. So the build farm, all the build scripts, test scripts, the website, API, everything is open source. It's all on GitHub. You can view and commit to everything. Everything the steering committee does is out in the open, except for a couple of legal and financial discussions which have to be kept behind closed doors for obvious reasons. You can see there's a listing of all of the various technologies we use at Adopt at the moment. So primarily we use Ansible for our infrastructure as code to spin up all of our static and dynamic instances. We use good old Bash and Groovy for our build scripts. We've decided to go Kotlin for the API. A lot of the tests are just written in plain old Java. We use various JavaScript technologies for the website, so on and so forth. So there's a lot going on. Here are some of the backers of Adopt OpenJDK. As you can see, there's a really wide variety of folks, including some of the vendors who produce their own OpenJDK, right? They've seen the value in having this, and we're really grateful for all of their support. Some of the folks who have stated they use Adopt OpenJDK in production. So again, you see some pretty household name logos in there. So sort of a testament to the binaries that we produce. Again, we're open and transparent about everything, so we tell you about our download numbers. So this is one I pulled just the other day. We've had over 190 million downloads. Now, download stats, of course, do not equal usage stats, so it is a bit of a vanity metric. But as I said, it's been a runaway success. It's been really fun to be involved with. You can dig into the specific Docker stats for those who want to look at the container side of things. How's this all organized? So you've got the steering committee there who oversees everything, and it really is a steering committee as opposed to a technical steering committee. Every kind of team is actually has the autonomy to run the way it sees fit. And you can see kind of the major groupings there below. So we have an infrastructure group who looks after all of the build and test machines and does all the Ansible work and looks after some of the helper scripts around Jenkins and things. We have the build team. So if you want to learn how to build Java and how to create the debug symbols or build on a cool platform like Lego Mindstorms or figure out how to build a more efficient Docker container images, so on and so forth, then that is the place for you. If you're interested in tests, you want to understand that the Java you're getting is well tested, right, from a quality perspective. Then the test team is the place for you, and we do everything from like really small unit tests, including the tests within OpenJDK itself, through to large-scale system tests, performance tests, so on and so forth. The really cool bit I'll get into in a couple of slides from now, where we actually drop the Adopt OpenJDK binary we've built into a Docker container running, various popular, running a popular open source framework or library, let's say JUnit or Spring Boot or the Scala programming language. We run their tests and make sure that the Java binary we're driving under the hood there isn't causing any harm, which is a really cool thing. And we can you can keep chaining all of these Docker containers in a row in a pipeline and just test more and more of your apps as you go through. What else do I need to say there? That's about it now. So here's a diagram explaining the flow of how we work. So I won't bore you to death. This is typical CI/CD stuff, really, except we do it at a pretty large scale, and we have to be pretty careful about our security and things. But we basically mirror all of the repositories from upstream OpenJDK. If it's a GitHub-based mirror, that's really easy. Thank you, Project Scala. So a big shout out to the Oracle folks who helped make that transition possible. If it's a Mercurial forest, then we have some really gnarly Git to Mercurial conversion scripts that do some pretty awesome mirroring and have been a constant source of pain in our lives. You can see there that we run the builds, we run a massive test pipeline, and then once we have a known good binary, we run a release and then build installers and the Docker images and so on and so forth. We make the binaries available through an API, which is fronted by Swagger. And the website also actually directly talks to the API to go get its binary and display those to the end user. And some other folks have also built really cool client libraries to talk to the API. So I believe there's a Java installer. I think perhaps SDK Man or a couple of others are also looking at integration there. So one of the reasons why you can really trust the Adopt OpenJDK binaries, and this is actually a service we offer to any of the other OpenJDK providers, and some of them are starting to use this, is the full test pipeline that we have, the Adopt Quality Assurance suite. So to be very clear, this is not Java compliance, it's not the TCK, so you cannot run this and say that you are Java compliant. This is purely just a quality thing, right? This is unit tests and system tests and so on and so forth, but it's not a test against, that you're testing the specification of the APIs and things like that. So you can see here we run tons and tons of tests. It's about now, I think it's roughly 110,000 tests for a major platform and version combination. So every time we do a release, we run something like 60 or 70 million tests, as I recall. So it's a really behemoth effort. It's really cool to see going past. And we welcome any and all pull requests and offers of new projects or new Docker container images of open source things that you want us to test is the sort of thing that you can add here. So that is my complete bias section over. There is the URL for it, and there is the place you can talk to us in Slack. But to be clear, I talked about all the other choices before, and they're all very, very good ones. So I would personally happily, in production, run any OpenJDK from all of the providers I mentioned previously, especially if the binary is being TCK'd, and if the binary has gone through the Adopt Quality Assurance, then you've got some really good assurance about the quality and the compliance of those binaries. So in conclusion, pick your Java very carefully, right? Licensing has changed. You need to make sure that if you want to enter a commercial arrangement and get that level of support, that you're doing so with your eyes wide open, right? If you don't want to have commercial support, then there are lots of choices for you, and you can find a vast majority of those up on Docker Hub. You can search for things like Corretto for Amazon, Zulu for Azul. You can search for Adopt OpenJDK, so on and so forth. Bias choice, if you're in doubt, we think Adopt OpenJDK, or I think Adopt OpenJDK is a great choice. And the reason why I personally still love it so much is that it really is that kind of community-driven effort, right? There's a whole bunch of different folks from, Red Hat, IBM, Microsoft, from academia, from University of Zurich, Java user groups, all sorts of folks involved in driving this thing. And it's kind of a labor of love as well as an effort to make sure you get a good binary. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your attention. Here are some links that you can follow for the J4K conference. I've also popped in my Twitter handle there. The Cariana one is the one if you want to talk to me seriously. Diabolical Dev one is if you want to see or talk to me not so seriously or get some links to some of my other talks where you see some scathing discussions, including about Docker and Kubernetes. I've said some rude thing about Kubernetes in the past, for which I should apologize. So again, thank you for your attention, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference. And for the folks who are joining me in Q&A right now after this recording, look forward to your questions and speak to you soon.